Okay, today we tackle a truly inexhaustible topic: what to expect when you take sacred mushrooms. Fresh off of retreat, Eric and Courtney offer a roadmap to familiarize you with the lay of the land ahead of time. And even if your next trip won't be your first, there's something valuable here for everyone. You're listening to Psilocybin Says. To support it, like and subscribe on YouTube or your podcast platform of choice, and stay connected on Instagram and TikTok.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Psilocybin Says.
Hey there. Welcome to our new lapel mic featured episode.
Yeah, if you're watching on video, then you see us moving our hands around.
Whoa, we don't have microphones we're holding. Upgrade.
Seems like it. It's a little weird, but...
Today is part 2 of our 3-part podcast episode series of preparation and what to expect during a mushroom trip and integrating a mushroom trip. So today we're talking about part 2, what to expect during a mushroom trip. 101.
And so for that, I'm going to eat 10 grams of mushrooms and let you watch me.
Whoa. And then you'll just find out. You'll just watch.
I should really do that sometime. I should really just eat like 10 grams of mushrooms and...
I agree.
Take that and let people watch and see.
I was really close to wanting to record my last trip the other weekend.
Yeah.
But then I was like, how's that going to work?
Yeah, it's long.
It's a long recording. A little hyperlapse. Extreme hyperlapse.
All right, so we did realize that we didn't talk really any about intention setting during the preparation. And I think that's because most of the time when we're working with mushrooms and we're working with people, the intention setting really comes in heavily on the trip. When you're sitting down, getting ready to eat mushrooms, like, why am I doing this? When you're prepping and you're going towards it, there's a sense of why you're doing it for sure. But when you're getting within those couple of hours leading up to actually taking the mushrooms, you get a lot more intentional generally, and you really start to focus in on that intention. So I want to talk about that here. My perspective on it, and I'm curious how Courtney will expand on this, is a little bit different probably than what is often shared in psychedelic circles, at least in my experience. A lot of people talk about this in terms of having very specific intentions, like, I know I'm going to the mushroom for this reason. And I used to do that, and I still will maybe kind of carry in a background thought of, I would like to work on this, or I would like to experience this. But over the years, my intentions have just evolved into whatever is best for me. The mushrooms, consciousness, give me whatever healing I need right now. And I found that to be a really helpful because very often our intentions don't fulfill like we expect them to, even when we're having limited expectations. Mm-hmm. And so it helps me to go with the flow of the experience and get more out of the experience if I put less kind of demands on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, intention in itself is somewhat of a loaded topic, but I like what you said. So we're just coming out of a group sacrament camping retreat. So we just got home yesterday. So 15 of our church members communed together, and we had a team of 8 clerics and ministers there in support. So this is pretty fresh for us.
Yeah.
But I like what you said around the campfire the morning before the communion, before the dose, and talking about intention. And you said, instead of us thinking about intention as far as what we want to get out of the experience, let's think of bringing in an intention, like just bringing something in to the mushroom space. And that seemed to really resonate positively with a lot of people there.
That's the first time I ever thought about it or spoken in that way as well. It just kind of struck me that we go to this experience always wanting to extract something out of it, but the reality is that as with all things in life, we get back what we put in. So what is it that we're bringing to this experience?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that it helped me to reframe stuff, and it did seem like people have got that.
Yeah. So this does seem to be a really powerful, like, first part of the phasing of a mushroom experience, which we've kind of broken down into 5 different parts. So this first part being like, okay, we're sitting down, we're like, we've got our mushrooms, this is the day of, and intention is at the forefront, really like, whoa, this is happening right now. I'm about to have this potentially profound journey and experience. So sitting with that and being intentional about it, which you already are if you're considering all the phases of the experience. So, so then, like, the next part would clearly be eating
That's next.
Communing, consuming, dosing, however you want to call it. How are we doing this? There's so many different ways now. So touching on that.
Yeah, before that though, I do want to say, you talk about these different parts, but these distinct parts are not so distinct, right? Even as we're talking about this, I'm reflecting on how many times I have felt the mushrooms coming on before I even ate them, and other people saying the same thing. So even the actual experience itself is not clearly defined by eating the mushrooms. However, eating the mushrooms is a very important part.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of takes on this. We're going to do an episode entirely on how to eat mushrooms, or how the different ways that people consume psilocybin, and maybe how some of those operate differently. I've always loved seeing the whole mushroom, appreciating the mushrooms, and then eating the mushrooms without any type of, masking. I hear people talk about putting them on pizza, putting them on peanut butter sandwiches, and I just think, wow, that's one way to do it. And also, if I can help it, I like to eat fresh mushrooms. Weighing mushrooms is important for a lot of people. Most people want to know what their dose is, and that can be valuable to a certain degree. My general approach most often is to, if I'm eating mushrooms just myself and I want to deep dive solo, I tend to eat mushrooms until, like, the mushrooms tell me to stop. I'll weigh stuff out sometimes, but over the years, my experience is that the dosage doesn't matter nearly as much as our openness going into it. But I don't know. What do you want to say about actually eating the mushrooms?
Yeah, so I lean towards being a purist, more of a purist mentality anyway, when it comes to food and experiences. So I kind of like to cut the fat, the unnecessary stuff if possible. I really personally enjoy the way mushrooms taste raw, which seems to be kind of uncommon, but I enjoy it. And I do think a big part of that is appreciating the relationship I have with them, like majorly appreciating it. So just reveling in that as I eat ideally fresh mushrooms, which there's a chemical explanation for that, but that's my ideal way to eat mushrooms if I can. But I know people also like to make tea with mushrooms, and there's this whole lemon teching thing. If you have a limited amount of mushrooms and you'd like to have a stronger experience, that's something to look into. If you're somebody like, I know in Jamaica, we had quite a bit of experience with people who, for the most part, from my recollection, had been on SSRIs for a really long time, and they needed to eat more mushrooms to have the experience they wanted to have. So we ended up making pretty blue smoothies for them, just to get that mass of mushroom down. So there's different ways to do it. I know chocolate bars are going around like crazy. And
Encapsulating. And I guess the last thing I would personally like to say about that part of this is that how you consume the mushrooms is a factor in how you experience the mushrooms. And that's not just chemically. Like Courtney said, fresh versus dry, there's a chemical explanation we can go into in another episode there. Also, if you include chocolate or other substances, there's, interactions there chemically. But everything comes to set and setting, and everything impacts your set and setting, right? Everything that you're thinking, everything that you're experiencing, everything around you, whether you're aware of the subtlety or not, it is having an impact on your experience right now, and especially when you're on psychedelics. And so if you're taking mushroom gummies versus taking fresh mushrooms versus taking, encapsulated mushrooms, that is going to set your mind in a different way of thinking that will have maybe a very subtle, maybe a not so subtle impact on how you relate to the experience.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, just touching on it to wrap up this part, that that recollection of being able to see the whole mushroom, whether it's dried or fresh, like seeing it as you're taking the time to like mindfully eat it, you recall that in the midst of a peaking in a mushroom experience, and when in a completely different realm, and like that can be really helpful to have like that flash of remembering the experience of intentionally saying, I am eating, like I am communing with this. I'm intentionally entering into this relationship and connection with the help of this mushroom versus throwing back capsules and basically having very little recollection of what just happened or what you just put into your field.
You don't get to pick any mushrooms out of your teeth if you eat more capsules either.
I
like the leftovers personally.
Whoa.
I do. I like the finding a little nugget of mushroom in my.
Oh my gosh. I must chew them like really slow, little by little, because I don't really find mushroom chunks in my teeth.
Well, you're one of the only ones. I hear a lot of people talking about picking mushrooms out of their teeth.
I guess, yeah. Like on the onset, there's definitely some like, okay.
Yeah. All right, so that's a big topic that I really look forward to exploring in time. How we take mushrooms, and that's becoming more relevant as we have more modalities that come up. The gummies and the extracts and all that. So looking forward to talking about that, but I won't focus too much on that right now. Now we're going to talk about actually getting into the experience itself. So you've taken mushrooms, you're waiting for the mushrooms. What's happening?
Yeah, what is happening? So pulling from my most recent experiences of both being in the mushroom space and then observing, and kind of like combining those. The last mushroom experience I had, so there's variables here again as far as how quickly the mushrooms, you notice the mushrooms kicking in. There's all kinds of variables, like have you been fasting, and did you eat fresh or dry, and the kind of mushrooms you ate, and all that. So that's going to like impact the timing, your openness to the experience, all that stuff. The last time I ate mushrooms, it took about 5 minutes for me to feel that I'm like, okay, I'm entering the onset period. Took about 5 minutes.
So do you think that was just your previous associations, or do you think they were actually hitting you? So you ate dried mushrooms, right?
Yep. I ate dried ovoids, and to reference what you had said before about feeling the trip coming on before even eating mushrooms, I was definitely already feeling the experience. And I do think that's in large part due to my all the experiences I've had and being able to pull from that and remembering the feelings and my body kind of kicking in already.
Even the taste could connect you to memories.
Even
right?
the smell. As soon as I smelled the mushrooms, it was
true.
like, like I felt that little in my field.
Interesting.
And so there's that. I'll say that. In my earlier experiences, at this stage, there was the experience of a lot of anxiety, my body physically shaking, feeling very nervous about not knowing what to expect, not knowing how I was going to respond to the experience, all those thoughts and fears kind of rattling around before the actual onset of the mushrooms. So I feel like for most people, there's this period of that to a certain degree, anxiety and nervousness.
There's usually this,
Before.
I feel like there's very often this like, oh, well, can't go back now.
Right.
Not sure what I just did to myself, but I've done something
The no
that I have to
going
deal with. Yeah.
Here we go. Tick, going up the roller coaster.
They don't stop the roller coaster once it starts.
No. Right. So reflecting on this past weekend, watching people in that phase, kind of this settling, this kind of like, okay, moving around, trying to get comfortable, finding the space, the nervousness, like where do I go? Where do I sit? Is this the right spot for me? Kind of settling in type of
unsettled, moving to settled. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll see, like, often people will kind of be talking to each other for the first 15 minutes or so, and then you see, individuals kind of start to quiet down, or you can see they start to feel a little different, and they're like, they kind of go their own way, And even when I'm by myself, my last big dose, I was walking around, just kind of pacing, and I'm meditating and whatnot, and qigong, and then like as it really started kicking in, and I knew that I was, going on a significant ride, that's when I just like go to the floor, either sit or kneel or whatever it is at that point. A lot of times I'll stand, but for that one, I was on the ground. So yeah, just you like watching this trajectory of, sitting there intentionally, taking the mushrooms mindfully, waiting patiently with a little bit of anxiety, and as it starts to come on, this kind of very often even some physical manifestations of that energy movement. It could be yawning, it could be kind of giggling or sighing, maybe little tears start to come, and then it really starts to move in. We're past the onset and we're getting into the full experience now. And that's when I experience it almost as something else is taking the wheel, right? Something else is driving now. And I think that can be challenging for many of us to give ourselves over to, because we're so used to being in the illusion of control. And so to realize that you're not can be really challenging. And there's even been times that I've experienced this notion of almost a symbiotic experience, like as the mushrooms start to take over or take whatever control, then it occasionally or often feels like the mushroom is becoming human, sort of. It's like we are coming together in this partnership to experience each other, and I'm giving the mushroom kind of whatever control over my experience so that it can help me experience itself. I don't know. It can be. That's a weird thing that maybe a lot of people don't get, but I do for sure.
Yeah, for me, it feels like, all right, I'm in the house of the mushroom. I am a guest in like the the space of the mushroom, and here I am a guest. Like, this is a mushrooms house, the mushrooms rules. I'm just gonna, I have arrived in the house of the mushroom. So I'm just gonna be present and listen and do what I'm told.
Give myself over.
It's not my house anymore.
I mean, and the quicker we can just give ourselves over to the experience, the more beneficial that'll be. It can be really tough to do, even for experienced voyagers, I think, at times. But yeah, that is a really valuable approach.
Yeah, and oftentimes, like, really throughout, really up into the first half of the mushroom experience for me, there's a lot of like mucus release. And it can go like throughout, but for me, that's when it's heaviest, this desire to expel, like spit specifically. And it does kind of last throughout, but it's like heaviest then. And I know, like, for first time mushroom eaters, there's the experience of a lot of mucus, but there's also generally this experience of like uncomfort, letting it out, letting it go, and just expelling it and feeling okay doing that. Like, particularly for women, I feel like, because it's more acceptable for a man to hawk a loogie on the street.
I wanted to say that first. I wanted to say hawk a loogie.
Women, not all women, I'm not speaking for everybody, but culturally,
Y'all
women don't generally.
Y'all Kentucky girls know how to hawk a loogie, though.
That's very true, but still, the Kentucky girls generally.
Same thing goes with the purging. You know, there's this very often during the come up, there can be this sense or a need to purge. It's not like vomiting, but that's kind of what it feels like. This nausea that sets in. I don't want to go into a whole big thing about the nausea because a lot of people have different takes on it. I believe the majority of it, though, is an energetic movement, and that's because when people allow themselves to express the moving of that nauseous energy, that they feel better afterwards. And so moving that out is often accompanied by mucus or some kind of like gassy belching maybe. And it's really, really helpful to just engage with that, move it out, and then move on to the next part of this, which is kind of getting towards the peak. And the peak of the mushroom trip, wow, it can be really confusing. It can be very clear. It can be very intense, though. No matter what, there's usually this kind of sense of intensity. And we haven't talked really about the waves yet, but very often individuals relate their mushroom experience as coming in waves, the intensity having this kind of waviness to it. In the onset, you'll often feel that too. It's kind of like small peaks of intensity and then kind of pulls back, catch your breath, and then here comes another wave and another. And then once at this peak, it's just like you can just generally feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like I could not take any more. When will this be over? Am I going to be able to hold it together through this?
Yeah, and this is where the like dichotomy between trusting the process, trusting the experience of the mushroom experience versus not having a trust for it can have a big impact. For me, this experience is very much, the peak is this process of full surrender and full, an opportunity to practice fully letting go and having faith in the experience. And there's certainly been opportunities or times where I have not taken that opportunity to let go, and I haven't trusted the process, and I've, instead of leaning in and letting go to it, I've like pushed back and said like, I don't want this. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't want it, and tried to get away from it.
Work out for you.
Well, turns out you can't get away.
I peed all over the house and ate a bunch of rocks.
Yeah, that's about how that worked out. I was trying to get away and couldn't do it. So I had a big headache afterwards and a lot of apologizing to do. Basically.
I still, because I feel like I am an unconscious control freak. I still, find myself in my personal journeys. It's more challenging for me to just completely let go. When I'm in the journeys of assisting others, it's easier for me to let go because, it's just, I don't know. I can associate the benefits, the value of that, the importance of that, a little more easy to the surrounding experience. But I think I'm pretty getting a whole lot better. Looking back at my last big dose, I really did just allow myself. I gave into it. It was very uncomfortable. I kind of was on all fours for a couple of hours, just sweating and drooling and crying and really loving it. So maybe it's not as true as I stated. I'm pretty good.
When's the last time y'all heard somebody say that? I was sweating and drooling and crying and really just loving it,
I do actually. I do. The most challenging part of a trip for me is really that first hour as I'm intentionally letting myself go. Intentionally giving up, not wanting to that ego, physical part of myself, not wanting to lose influence. After the peak, what's funny about this to me is a lot of people, even on their first experience, can identify when they've hit the peak and are starting to come over it. I don't know that that's the same with other substances, maybe LSD, and I think that has a lot to do with classic psychedelics are in many ways provide clarity, right? And so you're able to, rather than if you're drunk or really high, it's not as easy for you to identify where you are in the process, I don't think. But with mushrooms, even when it's confusing, there still is this can be this kind of aspect of clarity. So anyway, most people, in my experience, most people are able to say, okay, I think I'm over the peak right now. I think I've passed the
yeah. I'm reflecting on personal experiences and space holding experiences, this experience, without getting very much into it at all, just touching on it, this experience of, because you mentioned clarity amidst the chaos and confusion, this experience of clairvoyance that can happen with people, and also communicating with ancestors, other beings, interdimensional beings, however you want to phrase it, and receiving messages and that kind of clarity. I mean, that's kind of how I've experienced it, a clarity in other realms. There's a clarity in another realm of existence, but the lack of clarity is more of in this realm, I feel like. And so for me, reflecting back on my experiences, being able to have, recognizing clearly, okay, here I am in another realm communicating in a way I wasn't aware I could communicate, but not being able to communicate in my typical way of communicating. So as after the peak, coming back into, okay, I think I can form some words now, and kind of I'm trying to bring these messages in my head into a way in which I would commonly communicate them, verbally with English words. Whereas, yeah, like when you're talking about alcohol intoxication, it's just all like a fuzz.
Yeah.
There's no like
There's not clarity.
Otherworldly clarity.
No,
it's just fuzziness.
Yeah. It's, oh gosh, there's so much here that I could kind of dig into and reflecting on this, but just wanting to think of it in terms of like, you know how like when you're on an airplane, and even if you're in an airplane for the first time, you can feel that descent. You know when you're descending because there's a change in air pressure, or there's just a general sense. And it's almost like when your spirit is not returning to your body, but when your awareness is kind of sinking back down into that physical level of awareness. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm coming back into my body now. I can feel myself starting to reassimilate and descend back into this physical form.
Yeah.
And it can still take an hour or two at times for words to come together after that peak. It can be very confusing. I often have a hard time with any kind of expressing any kind of complex idea until many hours after the peak, and find myself communicating in almost childlike, very simple terms. And it's helpful. It's helpful when working with other people, and it's helpful in even trying to describe our own experience without getting into, real descriptive language, but just kind of being in that kind of childlike wonderment state is a really beautiful and powerful place to be. It's probably my favorite part of the trip, honestly. My favorite part of taking mushrooms is the 2 hours after the peak. Just being there with people, or even if I'm by myself, like that is the place where I'm cognizant of my surroundings, but I'm also cognizant that words cannot describe my surroundings. And there's just this like,
wow,
like the drywall and everything that went into making drywall and putting it on the walls. And, it's just like, oh, it's so much more than just a sheet of drywall.
Yes. Yeah, so that's just powerful, really powerful recalling that.
It's an incredible place. It's an incredible place. Go ahead.
And touching on, like, again, all the variables that go into the experience with the mushroom, like thinking of being solo, dosing solo, just with yourself, versus with one other person, versus with a group of people, like being able to look around as well. Because I feel like this is really common for people in a group to be assessing everybody else in the group. Like, okay, I'm feeling this way. Like, hold up. How's everybody else feeling over here? And seeing as well the stages, which can be clear with somebody's, maybe not clear, but more apparent where someone is at in the experience based on their body language and things. And seeing that within a group that like I'm recalling the vocals, like how the vocal experience shifts after the peak. Like I can so clearly hear, like it goes from more of like a moaning. The peak is very like moany and like, whoa, like navigating this realm and like also trying to feel it and it coming out very like moaning, almost like childbirth. If you've ever experienced that, whether you've given birth or been with somebody who's given birth, those primal, like, ooh, like very low tones, which like help us like open up, and let things through. And that tonal vocalizing shifting into more of like a like, laughing or like screaming, kind of as the peak is behind us. Yeah.
So what comes after the peak?
What comes after the peak?
Downslope.
The downslope, the come down, as they say. So that's generally...
I stopped coming down, so I can't tell.
You're just up.
I'm just there.
You're just there. Gosh, it's crazy how talking about this,
You can feel it.
Just feels...
Pathways open up.
Yeah. Whew. The importance of integration, part 3. Stay tuned for the next episode. So this is generally happening, the come down, the downslope, hours, 4 through 6?
4 to 6, yeah.
So, and that can be apparent by, I can form some words now.
Get up and walk around.
I can go to the bathroom finally. I've been wanting to for hours. Yeah, okay.
Those are hands at the ends of these things. Okay.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I am having a human experience now. And I can say that out loud now. Yeah, so being able to form words and like this beginning of integrating a little bit the process, trying to put it into words.
Yeah, that's also a beautiful part of this, is when you can start relating to others again, and you can see the wonderment in their eyes, or just feel it within your own experience if you're flying solo, and just sitting with that. For me, that's when I like to, if I'm by myself, then I do like to start maybe getting a little more intentional or active in my engagement. I may take some notes. I may do some audio recordings. I've done that at times. Sometimes I found myself painting when I'm by myself, or sometimes I'm just there with the stars and there with the sky and just really trying to absorb the profundity of the experience. With the fire, being with the fire is really powerful at that time. And just feels like it's such a deep connection to something that is an integral part of our human history. Like, I just did something that we've been doing for thousands of years and we still don't fully understand. It's really powerful. And that come down period really can last for days and weeks. It can I'm still in awe. 24 hours. We took a dose 48 hours ago. Right about now, we were dosing. I took a gram. But right now, I still feel the after effects. I still feel that sense of wonder and amazement. I'm still communicating with people that we shared that space with, and really just continuing to appreciate it. Not even so much, I'm switching my perspective again. It's evolving from this idea of what am I getting out of it to what am I appreciating about it. Like I don't know. It's not like I'm regretting or anything, but definitely looking back at how and seeing how we as humans tend to try and extract value out of everything, when the real value is just in... Thank you, Smokey. The real value is just in appreciating whatever it is. Not trying to get something out of it more than just an appreciation for what that thing is. That goes for people.
Yeah.
Anyway, that can move into our integration conversation.
Yeah, which is, for me, been such a powerful, I don't want to say lesson, but experience in the mushroom space is this different perspective on time. And likewise, how we've talked about in our last episode where we talked about preparation, fully recognizing that as such a big part of the experience of the mushroom experience, which right now in these modern times where we're relearning culturally how to have these experiences and look at these experiences, that's left out of the conversation a lot, like when talking about the trip itself, is that it really is like, this is the trip. This is it right now. It's after the trip. It's during the trip. It's before the trip. It's really like kind of all the same. It's different. And it's also like always right here with us. So it can definitely, it does prolong the mushroom trip in itself, recognizing that it's not, we're not just like taking things out of the experience. We're living
we're always in
the experience right here and now.
Yeah. And so now that we've kind of talked about the general trajectory of a mushroom trip for those who may be new to mushrooms, take everything we said and forget it. Because, here comes the smokester coming into the shot.
The trip dog.
Yes, Smokey, you were a good trip sitter. Yes, you were. But the reality is that this general description of a mushroom trip is just that, and there is no one way that everybody or even any one person trips. It's actually a moving target. My experiences have certainly evolved over the years. I'm sure yours have as well, in terms of what they look like and the trajectory of them, what you experience. Everybody is so individual, which is another beautiful aspect of the mushroom, but it also makes it really hard to communicate expectations and why we should have as few expectations as possible. This last retreat that we did is a great example of that. In literature and psychedelic circles talk a lot about how SSRIs typically interrupt an experience. They dampen the experience. We had 2 individuals on this retreat who have been long-term SSRI takers, and both of them had very powerful experiences at 5 grams or less. And so, this has been one of the challenges over the years as we've tried to communicate, educate around psychedelics, is that there is just generalities can be made, but they should be taken with a very, very large grain of salt. So now that with that being said, how do you describe or talk to people about mushroom experiences, and convey that unpredictability, yet try to give them a sense of knowing or comfort in what to expect?
Oh, well, how do I talk to people about it? Well, I try to put it in terms, in metaphors that people might be able to grasp onto a little bit better. Like, I use a really the most common metaphor I use is running a marathon, like preparing for a marathon. If you're going to prepare for a marathon, you don't just like sign up for the marathon today to run it tomorrow, and you don't expect to like go into a marathon like thinking, this is going to be easy, or I don't know. I mean, it's hard to, it's really hard to put it into words.
Yeah.
And like what we're doing here is also us integrating our own experiences. Like that's a big part of it. Us doing this podcast is personal integration, and it's enjoyable to talk about it. And that's part of the experience. This mind-blowing, spiritual, profound experience is the act of processing the experience and living it. So, I don't know.
It doesn't answer the question.
I don't know. I don't know. know.
Well, that's a great answer because I don't either. And people ask me, like, what do I expect? Or there's a lot of questions that people ask me about the mushroom space, and the answers are so varied. There are so many variables that go into even considering outcomes and experiences that I don't even know. Like, the more I understand the experience, the less I feel like I'm able to answer questions truthfully, because there is no single answer. You know? I mean, that whole thing with the SSRIs, this has opened up to me a very seems like a very clear understanding that this is much more of a spiritual experience than a chemical experience. And I know I've been kind of saying that, but when I was working with both of these individuals, one of which I had worked with in Jamaica years ago, and saw the power that individual had to channel information and energy, and then working with them again years later when they were on SSRIs and seeing them have the same experience, like not the same experience, but an even more intense experience, perhaps, with the SSRIs at a similar to a little bit lower dose. And as I was working in that situation, it just like that was kind of the big revelation for me, was this individual is this is a spiritual experience. This is an energetic experience. Yes, the chemistry has something to do with it, or can, but there are other factors involved. And so,
well, the chemistry is a manifestation of what is underlying that. I mean, all of this is like,
but not if you're looking at SSRIs and things that are blocking serotonin, that would block psilocybin as a binder. You know, they're binding to the same receptor sites. They're chemically almost identical, you know, and so it does stand to reason. And, you know, maybe we'll find some scientific explanation for how this kind of functionality here that doesn't take it away from being something spiritual. I mean, this individual who I'm referring to, the first time I met them, I looked in this person's eyes and I knew that there was something very powerful. There's a very powerful spirit in that body. And she even said to me this weekend afterwards, how did you know? How did you know looking at me all those years ago? And I don't have a good answer for that. But the fact that the experience that was had this weekend was so powerful, despite that chemical interaction that was there, or that chemistry that was going on inside of her body, her having that incredibly powerful spiritual experience showed me very clearly that there is much more going on here than just some receptor binding. And I'm not sure how that fits into the conversation, other than the generalities that we make are, again, to be taken with a grain of salt, because everybody functions differently. I don't want to say the damage, but there's a conversation on LinkedIn going on right now amongst the psychedelic people there that I'm involved with about this kind of these general assumptions that are being made about psychedelics after the media push that we've seen from the time Michael Pollan's book came out till now, and whether or not that is detrimental to the practitioners and people who come to psychedelics brand new, you know, because it's like I was trying to ask you, somebody who's had a lot of experience with psilocybin, how to explain your understanding of the experience, and there's just not really good words, and it's a moving target.
Yeah, we can try, and then ultimately it's like, but like you said, but let all that go, because there's there's common themes, and then there's also like complete surprises and like, what just happened? Never would have expected that types of experiences. So you can try. It's fun to try. It's fun to try and explain.
What about the common thread of trusting the process? That may be the one aspect of this that continues to come into play for me, regardless of scenario, every single time, whether it's by myself or as a sitter with a dozen or one people, taking mushrooms myself or in a group, no matter what the potency or intensity of it is, trusting the process seems to be one of the most, if not the most important part of the process. If we can, so that may be the only common thread that runs through this for everybody, is that the more you trust this, then the safer you are and the better your outcome will be. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great metaphor there in general. In life. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The thing about psychedelics and mushrooms in particular for me anyway is that it can, like, if in a normal waking scenario, if I think I'm having organ failure, or I think I'm dying, or if I think I'm going insane, right, I'm going to be more inclined to seek help. Whereas in mushrooms, whatever it is I'm experiencing, and I have experienced some very extreme states, and whatever I'm experiencing, I know that I can trust it. I know that it's good for me. I don't necessarily know that about, other circumstances outside of the psychedelic space. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Yes.
If I feel like I'm on fire, if I'm sitting here all of a sudden and I'm erupting in a fever that feels like I am on fire, or if I'm having cold chills that I feel like I'm freezing to my core, I don't know that I'm going to trust that process as much as I do when I'm on mushrooms.
Right. I feel like it's the manifestation of those ideas and like the questions that we have come up, like what's the term? Like the latency of the manifestation is just different time-wise. Like, I mean, like you called me on your last mushroom trip pretty freaked out, thinking like, should I go to the doctor or not right now? Like, I mean, I feel like the mushroom space is this grand mirror of opportunity to like take a look and see what's going on. So, I mean, y'all already know this, but like, it's just a more potent example of how things work in our regular day-to-day lives without eating mushrooms. There's plenty of people that walk around thinking that they're sick and dying, and then they actually get really sick and get cancer and manifestations of these paranoias and fears. And in the mushroom space, it can feel very much like, oh my God, I do have cancer. Okay, great. I've got cancer, and then coming out of that space, it's like, whoa. And that's where like integration comes in, and like our next conversation of interpreting the messages of the mushroom and trusting the process is not black and white either. It's like there's a lot of nuances built into that as well.
Yeah. I mean, even when I was calling you about wondering if I should go to the hospital because my hands were swollen, like I was trusting the process. But I was wondering if I'm at the stage in the process where I
where
need
I
to
go to
seek
the
medical
hospital.
attention.
Right, exactly. It's very nuanced.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. Okay, well, I guess we can probably move on to our integration conversation from here. Huh? I think we've covered kind of the bulk of what this experience could look like, and also reminded you that it could look like anything else.
Yeah, we didn't really fully touch on the 6 to 8 hour mark. I don't feel like
duration.
Yeah, that part where it's we didn't touch on eating mushrooms during the day versus the nighttime and how that can affect.
No, that's a big set and setting conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole set and setting conversation. But that whole experience of coming back. Depends on if you're in your house or you had this experience somewhere else and maybe you need to come back home, or maybe you're at home and now your kids are coming home. It's hour 7 and here comes the spouse and kids and that whole
referring back to a personal experience here.
That whole part of the experience can be
There's so
a
much
little
here.
weird.
You could just talk forever about taking mushrooms. There's so much that goes on here. Okay, so as usual, I'm not sure if we really helped anybody or not in this conversation. It's people ask me questions.
I helped myself.
I don't know. I don't even know what to tell you anymore. I was just thinking about, even you're talking about the duration of this, and I'm thinking about people who have multiple times seeing and experiencing a 2-hour trip where you get the message and then the trip just turns off. I've had that happen. I've seen it happen to people. So just predictably unpredictable.
Again, this is a 101 general video.
I don't think I do very well with one-on-one stuff.
Yeah. There is a general, and then there's but there are exceptions type of.
And the exceptions
disclaimer.
They start pretty quickly.
I know.
It's pretty quickly.
But for somebody that's been responsible for planning itineraries for the past how many years for mushroom retreats, I've had to rely on the general common experience to be able to cater to the majority.
Meal prep and all the other stuff that goes into it.
Meal prepping, yeah. So there is a general.
People want to kind of have one of a general idea. But it's just, it feels really important to me that people know that this is completely unpredictable. I think that's one of the most important safety or harm reduction elements that we can bring into the conversation.
Yeah.
So
it's very unpredictable.
Did my part.
Listen to the prep. Listen to all parts.
Listen to
part
all
1,
the episodes.
2, and 3.
Hey, I was really, really impressed. Really proud of the fact that we had medical professionals, long-term meditators. A lot of people this weekend on the retreat have talked about how valuable this podcast has been to them, saying that they listen to every single episode all the way through. And that's really, not only does it mean a lot, but I know that there's value, even though, and maybe that's part of the value that we bring is not talking about this in black and white terms like the majority of psychedelic education does. So anyway, thank you all for listening. Thank you for being a part of our community. And even if you're just listening, we consider you a part of our community. Please feel free to reach out to us on any of the social medias and also to leave a little review on iTunes or Spotify.
Yeah, if you have any questions that come up specifically around any of this, definitely reach out to us via email. We've answered some questions before and it's made some pretty great episodes. So you can reach out at psilocybinsays@gmail.com.
And we'll find another way to tell you that we don't know.
We'll talk a lot and then at the end we'll say, but really, we have no idea.